let's start with what happened yesterday. And it's a great way to dive into this with our boy Michael. Omar Khan creates $7 million in cap space by restructuring Alex Highsmith's deal. Brandon Ayuk, what is Khan cooking up for the NFL draft tonight? That is the biggest question. The biggest headline from yesterday, hands down, was Alex Highsmith, day before the draft, clears up $7 million for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're currently sitting somewhere around $18 million in available cap space. Just to give some context here, they will need, by the time that they sign all of their draft picks, which won't be tomorrow and it won't be Sunday and it won't be Monday, it's going to happen over the course of a week. The Steelers will need roughly $10 million to sign all of their draft picks, plus their undrafted guys and so on and so forth. So you're going to need a little bit of money, but you could come up with that money. And as we've talked about before, when it comes to the Brandon Ayuk thing, if the Steelers are going to make a move for a wide receiver, and I'm not saying that they're going to, we're going to talk about that in a second here, but if the Steelers are going to make a move for a wide receiver, they are not going to take on the entire cap space or the entire cap hit of that wide receiver. If Brandon Ayuk is $14.5 million or whatever, they're probably going to take around somewhere around $9 or $10 million of that cap hit in 2024. Courtland Sutton, I think, is 17, just under $18 million in 2024. I would imagine that's somewhere around $10 million once it's all said and done. They're not going to take on that entire salary just for this year. That's how most trades go down in the NFL. That's not just an Omar Khan thing, although it definitely helps to have a con artist running the show. But that's how most trades go down in the NFL, that the former team and the new team kind of agree on a number to split that cap hit. So anybody sitting here going, oh, $18 million, but you really only have $8 million, I think that's feasible. And I think you could come up with enough more relatively quickly to make that just kind of work out in your favor if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. Before I give my thoughts on what we thought the $7 million was for, I want to hear your thoughts on, you saw the news, $7 million, $18 million total right now. What were your first thoughts? Did you think trade?
I mean, the fact that shortly after the news, we know what Brandon Ayuk thought, or at least maybe what he was thinking after the news. He was dancing on his IG Live. He was dancing on his IG Live, and you sent it into the group text, and I'm like, listen, I don't know how to break this down, but there is maybe no coincidence there that he's dancing on his IG Live right when the Steelers open up some cap space. But whenever I saw that, I thought, okay, there's something that has to be going on here, especially with the timing of it. That tells me that there's something more coming over this weekend, or at least Omar Khan is trying to pull something off this weekend.
Yeah, I think they are. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to say it's Brandon Ayuk, and I won't lie to you. I haven't heard anything new on the Brandon Ayuk front. You know, the last I heard was exactly what I told you guys, that the Steelers expected a trade to get done, but they didn't know when that trade was going to get done, or if San Francisco was ever going to be on board enough to make it happen, that it was a 50-50 split. Where we sit here today, I believe that it's the same, that there are no new updates on the Brandon Ayuk situation, that San Francisco is still trying as hard as humanly possible to sign this guy to a long-term deal, but chances are that's not going to happen. I will say my first thought was maybe Courtland Sutton might be in the running here. Maybe it's a Courtland Sutton move. Maybe that's where they're headed, is let's create some cap space to go get the Denver Broncos wide receiver, because he's got a relationship with Russell Wilson. He caught 10 touchdown passes from Russell Wilson a year ago. He's a solid number 2, maybe a 1B. And I think if we're going to be honest, if we're just going to lay out where the Pittsburgh Steelers stand, not just today, but moving forward, you're giving up a lot less for Courtland Sutton, and your expectations for George Pickens remain a lot higher with a Courtland Sutton trade. And I think that's where the Steelers want to be, is they want George Pickens to be a superstar. They want him to turn into a Justin Jefferson or a Brandon Ayuk or a whoever you want to compare him to in the NFL. And they want that other guy to be a better Deontay Johnson. They want him to be a better number 2 in the wide receiver core. And I think Courtland Sutton fits that bill. I don't know if he works in the Arthur Smith offense, but I do think that if we're going to talk about, you know, a possible wide receiver trade during the NFL draft, I want to say that one's more realistic right now than Brandon Ayuk. And Sutton's going to cost you more money, but I think you could restructure that and extend him to lower that cap hit. And I think that's a conversation that the Steelers would have. I also don't think that they're totally opposed to a $17 million. And I don't know, what does his contract look like past 2024? I know there's an out after the 2024 season, but I don't think the cap hit is relatively high until maybe 2026. I think they're okay with that situation, paying a guy mid-range wide receiver money and having him be their number 2 while George Pickens develops into a number 1. Am I crazy to say those things?
No, and you look at his salary cap hit, he has a $17 million one in 2024, and then one more year on $17.8 million for the cap hit next season.
That's what I'm saying. I think I think you're setting yourself up for 2 years of a wide receiver. And just to add in Adam's question here, because I think it ties in perfectly, what would the draft capital be for a Courtland Sutton? I don't know. Am I crazy to say a 3rd round pick? Am I crazy to say that you could possibly give up 84 or 98 and go get Courtland Sutton and feel totally fine about that draft move? Is that if you're the Denver Broncos, are you taking that move? A 3rd round pick and we'll take Courtland Sutton from you? Maybe a 3rd and something next season?
You might have to throw in a sweetener, but I don't think that sweetener is going to be anything of much consequence, especially if you're going for a Super Bowl. What does a 5th or 6th round pick in 2025 really mean to you if you're going to get a true number 2 receiver that has been proven in this league and, like you mentioned, has a track record with Russell Wilson? So I do think that a 3rd rounder is probably along the lines there. I know that draft day trades in the past have gone for a little bit more capital, but I feel like if you could package one of those 3rds this year and include maybe a 5th rounder next season, then that's enough to get it done.
I agree. I think you could give away a 3rd. I don't even think you have to wait until the draft. I think you could do it before the draft, give away a 3rd round pick, maybe a 5th next year, if that's what we're thinking, a 5th next year, and get yourself Courtland Sutton. I don't think the Denver Broncos want to win right now. I think they just want to add as much capital as humanly possible. And I honestly think that before the draft is a realistic possibility, only because the Broncos might want to move up. They might want to take that 1st round pick and go from 12 to 6 or 12 to 5 or wherever and go get a guy like JJ McCarthy or, I don't know, Drake May, if they could get crazy enough and move up far enough. And they want as many picks as they could possibly get. Courtland Sutton isn't moving the needle. You know what I mean? You're not giving up 12 in Courtland Sutton to move up to 5. But if we're going to be honest, you could give up your 1st round pick this year, maybe your 1st round pick next year if you have one. I don't know what Denver's situation is. And a couple of mid-round picks like the Steelers' 3rd round pick and try to force your way into that top 10. And I think that could happen with ease. I love Adam's comment, but they have Zach Wilson. They do have Zach Wilson. And you know what? I think the best tweet I saw was Ben Albright saying, "Mom, you're not allowed to come to Denver for quite a bit of time after the Zach Wilson trade." I just think that Courtland Sutton's a more realistic name right now than Brandon Ayuk. And if this was past the NFL draft, I could look at Ayuk and say, okay, this could really happen. But I think the Steelers preparing for something right now. I would look more Courtland Sutton in the Denver Broncos than I would Brandon Ayuk and the San Francisco 49ers. And that has nothing to do with talent. That has nothing to do with fit. It has everything to do with the situation. And I think Courtland Sutton's situation is just a little bit better.